See, many Indians think that Indian culture is static. There is this one culture, and then Muslims came, and suddenly it got disrupted, and they're going to go decolonize things and go back to this very static structure.
Yeah.
And they're taking advantage of people's ignorance. You find all kinds of sexual relations in ancient India. Radha, is she married to Krishna? You ask this to members who and they'll get very disturbed. So not every culture, like for example in Buddhism and Jainism, there is no concept of God. So atheism is not some new idea that the West has discovered. It's an idea which has been in India forever. So mythological stories are designed to help the human mind grapple with uncertainty of existence. That's the purpose of
Yes.
these stories. Otherwise, these stories have no purpose. You'll find an image of an old sage who is Digambar, not wearing any clothes, and has a chilam in his hand. That would be scandalous in most parts of the world. The man is not wearing any clothes, he's having chilam in his hand. But in India, we will just accept it as, oh, he's a holy man. He has abandoned the normal way of living. But in the Vajrayana Buddhism, you have these imagery of these goddesses copulating with the gods. If you see just Google images of Shiva in Odisha temples, Lakulesh. Just search for the image of Lakulesh, and you will see a very clearly erect phallus over there, which of course disturbs people who have never seen those images. If you don't allow things to change over time, you'll go medieval, and I don't, medieval world order. Good for some people who want to cosplay, but they want to do cosplaying in air-conditioned room. Of course, they want that air conditioning.
Exactly.
So I want to say, you really go and live in a village, and then we will see how you will enjoy that life. After 3 days of cleaning the cow sheds, you'll be not in a very happy place.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast. As the name suggests, we have an extraordinary guest for you. We have with us Mr. Devdutt Pattanaik. He's one of India's most beloved mythologists. He's the author of more than 50 books and has written over 1,000 columns with bestsellers such as Jaya, Sita, My Gita, and Business Sutra, among others. He's also a celebrated TV personality with shows like Business Sutra on CNBC TV 18, Devlok on Epic TV, and Dance Sthapna on Sony Live. In our conversation today, we spoke to Devdutt ji about the karma theory and rebirth, about polygamy in Hinduism, about the supposed immoral depiction of divinity in our culture, about the descriptions of hell in Hinduism, and how sex can lead to liberation. Stay tuned till the end. This one is sure to blow your mind.
Hello, Devdutt ji. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much.
It's great to have you here, Devdutt ji. And we'd like to begin by touching upon your most recent book, The Stories We Tell. And in that, in one of the earlier chapters, you illustrated this 500-year model that you used to divide 4,000 years of history into these 500-year intervals just to help with categorization. And while there is a dizzying amount of diversity at any point in mythology, at a specific point of time within a geographical region, I think it's also possible sometimes to see narrative trends as well as an increase or a decrease in the relative focus or emphasis on particular deities at different points of time. For instance, the most common example is early Vedic period where there was more of an emphasis on deities like Indra, Varun, Vayu than later. Aapke book mein bhi, you'd also mention, for instance, 1500 BC to 1000 BC mein, there were more stories of Indra. 0 to 500 mein, you're starting to see, I think on coins, many-handed gods becoming, like their depictions becoming more popular. 500 to 1000 mein aap Anand Shayan mein, you're starting to see depictions of Vishnu. What we were curious about is, in your opinion, what kinds of forces shape these changes in trends and the relative emphasis? And also, what do these changes reflect about the minds of individuals in a society at a particular time, as well as the social dynamics in particular time period? So could you take us through maybe an example to illustrate?
Yeah. So, as I do that, it is important to remember, see, many Indians think that Indian culture is static. There is this one culture, and then Muslims came, and suddenly it got disrupted, and they're going to go decolonize things and go back to this very static structure.
Yeah.
And they're taking advantage of people's ignorance, because most people, we don't read history so much. I mean, it's just one subject in school. Culture is not taught at all. And really, it's not so critical as, say, science and math to get a job.
Yeah.
And then suddenly one day you decide to become Deshbhakt, and then you start having these weird ideas of Desh without understanding how life is very different over time. And stories are a very good way of figuring out how they are different. So let's take an example of, the easiest character is Indra.
Yeah.
So in the Rig Veda, when you see Indra, he is this great warrior god who fights battles against a demon called Vritra or sometimes Vala, and he liberates cows. He has a dog called Sarama, and he has a Vajra in his hand, which is like a club. His relationship, he's not sitting on an elephant. This image of Vishnu, Indra on an elephant does not exist in the Vedas. Even his association with the rain is very limited. It's not a rain god as such. He's just, there is the, he's more water, releasing the waters. It's not very clear that there is a rain god called Paranjaya, which is a very different god, but he's not associated with rain as such.
Yeah.
He's a very powerful god. And remember, almost out of 1,000 Vedic hymns, 200 are dedicated to him. He loves to drink Homa, for which there are 200 hymns. And he gets it through Agni, for whom there are 200 hymns. So 600 out of 1,000 hymns are only these three gods. So when we say Vedic pantheon and all that, we're really referring to primarily Indra. All the other gods are very minor characters, whether it's the Marutas or the Ashwins and Adityas. Vayu, you mentioned, is not there. Marutas is there. Maruta is the god of the storms. So, we really have a very vague understanding of this Vedic period, but Vedic period is this centrally around Indra, whom you invoke for victory in battle, for success in life. So it's a very, very macho god. That is a god which is 3,000 years ago. However, when I pick up something which is about 2,000, maybe 1,500 years ago, I suddenly find a very different Indra. I find an Indra in Buddhist traditions, Jain traditions, and Hindu traditions. Buddhist traditions, he's shown bowing to the Buddha. In the Jain traditions, he is worshipping the Tirthankara. He's bowing to them because he says the knowledge that you bring is greater than what I am. And in the Hindu traditions, you're finding him as god of Svargaloka. And Svargaloka, and he's an insecure man, afraid that the Asuras will take away all his splendor. He's riding this elephant. He's surrounded by Apsaras. And he is seeking the help of Shiva and Vishnu to defeat the Asuras. He's constantly worried that he's an insecure man who's afraid of his position going. Not quite what I see in the Vedas at all. How did this change happen? This happens over 1,000 years. So it's not, sometimes I see all these comic book, Comic-Con artwork, and they try to show Indra as the great Aryan god, and they show him on an elephant. And I'm like, elephants are not used in the Vedic traditions. They're familiar with elephants, but elephants, I don't think, were domesticated at that time. Domesticated elephants come much later. They were there. Even in the Harappa, we have a seal of an elephant. We don't know whether it's domesticated or a wild animal.
Wild elephant.
Because there's no sign of a... So you have to, a scholar will look at all these little details and say that, yes, elephant ka picture ka matlab nahi hai ki he's the elephant you see today, which is in a temple. It could be just wild animal far away that they admired, like a tiger, So in the Vedas also there is a reference to elephants, but was it domesticated? Not quite. You only find a domesticated elephant in, that's what makes the Mauryan Empire Mauryan. They have domesticated elephants. And that's 2,300 years ago. Alexander sees the domesticated war elephants being used. So that's much later period. So, we have, when you look at history, so what changed? What changed? Why did Indra change in this dramatic way? So the Vedic stories come from a group, the Aryas, who are coming from Northwest India. The story has already changed. It's not across Indo-European traditions. You have this story of a hero with a club in his hand, which is like Thor, or Thor in Norse mythology comes from the same source. Zeus comes from the same source. So these are common gods, but the difference is the god, when it comes to the Indian subcontinent, he is associated with water and something to do with rivers, which is not there in the Greek story. It is not there in the Norse story. There it is cattle and women. But here, cattle and women are metaphors. They have become, it's more about mountain, release of water from the mountain. So it's talking about a very different ecosystem. Breaking the dams and releasing the waters, which will go towards Samudra, which basically means a wide body of. So it's a very different, and it's about a mountainous location.
Yeah.
What has happened by the time of Indra is that the Mauryan Empire has risen, the Gupta Empire has risen. You have Yavanas or the Greeks coming into India. You have the Shakas, the Scythians coming into India, Parthians coming into India. This is all happening 2000 years ago. Lots of foreigners are coming to India. We all talk about, the Islamic invasion, which is 1800 years old. But 1000 years before that, there was another set of people coming in. And that changed the ecosystem. And suddenly you have this powerful god. And Buddhism has emerged, Jainism has emerged, which is talking that, wealth and power is not everything in life. There is more, wisdom is more important, meditation is important. So now the Indra is no longer the great powerful god of a tribal community, say 3000 years ago. He's now just a chief who is insecure about his position. You now have the Buddha on one side, you have the Scythians on the other side. So the society has gone through a change. When society changes, stories change.
That's fascinating. And I think a lot of those facets of the way Indra has evolved over time I was completely not aware of. And the sense I'm also getting is, and please tell me what you think, and Karan, if you disagree, please let me know as well. But you mentioned like the earlier Indra, the realm within which he's dwelling is more of like a tribal or a local leader. Whereas later on, as you see Indra's role start to change, it's because the geographical expanse within which ruling is happening is widened. And so your relation to the ruler also becomes more of, there's an element of being critical of the ruling or the ruler archetype as well.
Yes.
Is that also?
He's now an insecure king. See, remember when you're right, the Rig Veda is only Punjab and Haryana region, nothing more than that. By the time Buddhism and Jainism comes, you have spread across the Gangetic Plain to Bihar, to Jharkhand, Bihar, not South India. We have not even touched South India. This is all happening. South India starts only much later. The Satavahans, and after that, the Cholas, Pandyas, Chalukyas, that is all only 1500 years ago. Of course, in India, when we say 1500, we don't think much about it, but it's a long period.
It is.
So Indra as a god becomes sort of important as South India and all, where does his location comes? We have to remember this time, space, continuum when you're looking at stories. And elephants have become the symbol of kings because one of the things the Persians would import from India, the Greeks would import from India were elephants. That was the gift. We would import horses and export elephants. That is the horse is imported, elephant is exported. So elephants are being taken all the way from the Gangetic Plain. A large number of elephants are taken. So that's the great, and the ones who conquered it for the first time were the kings of Magad. So even in the Mahabharata, you have the story of the Magad kings with elephants. So whenever they talk about elephants, they'll always talk about the kings of Magad, of Jarasan's kinsmen have elephants. And the defeating of elephants, if you see, Buddha defeats elephants. Krishna defeats an elephant, Kuvalya Pida. You have all these stories of elephants being defeated. So elephant is a fascinating creature. It's clearly a Eastern phenomena and Southern
phenomena. And I also sense that war elephants were such a game changer when it comes to warfare and the degree to which one power can be dominant, that I think that association with regality, but also power, a sense of awe, I can see how they're linking to. And in fact, it's reminding me of what you mentioned in your book, Devdutt ji, that entire ki desh, kal, gun, ye context samajh ke, you can start to then explain a lot of phenomena.
These three words are very important in India, that anything you say, please check the geography, the history, and the people involved. There's three things will change everything in India. Everything will change. And once you recognize that principle, that's a very foundational principle of Indian thought, which is not found in other parts of the world. It's a very unique thing that we are contextualizing everything. Ki bhaiya kahan hua, kab hua, kaun the wahan pe. Once you understand this in storytelling, which, that is a big thing that we need to understand. Like I'll give you an example. You're talking about elephants as a game changer. They were a game changer till only 1500 AD, after which cannons came into the world. So the Mughals brought cannons with them. And when that's the game-changing thing, once the cannon came to India around 1500 AD, elephants lost their value. Then they became decorative. Then there were a lot of, because with a king's fort. Now there's a fort you have got, big doors. I could not break the fortress unless elephants can walk up mountains. They are very powerful. They are very capable of climbing mountains. So Gajapatis, the kings of Odisha, were the kings of had elephants. And if you have elephants, nobody can conquer you, because what I was asking somebody, how would they do that? They'll say they'll take about the elephant battalion and the army will walk behind the elephant. So imagine if 100 elephants are walking towards you. You're not going to stop them, right? It is like a
game over
castle. Like even in chess, the castle is really an elephant.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. It just creates a path. You have a highway created and the army is following you. The army just goes and then your army is scattered. There's nothing you can do. Nobody would attack a kingdom with elephants, because the elephant would just create a kind of a walking wall. And then that's it. And after that, the trees will grow. And again, so it's elephant. We don't realize the power of elephants in India. That's what made the kings kings. If you have elephants, then it can be a king.
That's very interesting insight.
So I think, Devdutt ji, we are talking about changing conceptions. And I think another change in conceptions, as I understand, and maybe I stand corrected, but in fact, the most common conceptualization of our relationship to God is, and I'm saying across cultures, not just in India, tends to be a paternalistic one. God is a father figure, God is to be feared, obeyed, served. However, in the mythology and practice in our subcontinent, what I find extremely moving is that there is a multiplicity of ways you can relate to divinity which are equally legitimate. The Bhakti bhavas. Agar hum Krishna ji ki story le, you can relate to him as Bal Krishna. The love you feel towards your child, the Vatsalya bhav. You can have Mirabai or the Gopi's relationship has sort of a romantic flavor to it. Madhurya bhav. Gopas I find lovely because they are his friends and his equals, and Makhan ki chori jab bhi karni hai, they are his co-conspirators also. And in Sudama, there is the inversion of the Dasya bhav where the deity, the divinity is rushing to Sudama, to wash his feet and tend to his wound. So I guess, what are your thoughts on these different ways of relating to divinity, its origins, like where does it come from in our subcontinent? And also, what do you think it says about how we understand and make sense of divinity in India?
So divinity is there in all cultures. In a polytheistic culture, the relationship with the divine is based on exchange.
Exchange.
I give. I don't get without giving. So exchange. So all tribal cultures, God is someone with whom you negotiate. It's like trading. You will trade with people. So you give bali and you get something. I'll give you this, you give me that. You give me this, you give me that. So there is a continuous exchange. So you're talking to an equal. You're not talking to someone he's another creature. He's just another creature of the forest. So this is something that, unlike an animal with whom you don't trade, because you control the animal, you control the plant. But these are these special beings in the cosmos with whom you trade. And this is something that most people, anthropologists are only now discovering, that polytheistic cultures do not have this paternalistic framework. A monotheistic concept. And a monotheistic, where you have one God, then he becomes father, mother, he becomes this powerful feudal leader. He becomes a king. So this idea of one God dominating everything and controlling everyone is a very Middle Eastern idea. It's not a global idea. So in African tribes, Japanese, Chinese, across the world, they would negotiate with the gods. There are different gods, the sun, the moon, fever gods, fruit, or disease gods. Some gods you are afraid of. So you give them, like a hafta that you give to a gunda. So you don't want that God to come into your life, or you have this God you want to come in your life. So you will entice them. So even today, we will have limbu and mirchi being put outside in Bombay. You will see on Saturdays, because these goddesses who can create trouble for you and bad luck for you, they like to eat limbu and chili. So you put that outside of the house, they'll eat it and they'll go away. So you feed them and say, andar matao. You will keep sweet things. So you want Lakshmi like sweet, so you'll keep Lakshmi food. So it's a negotiation happening. This is not a powerful God. You're just dealing with the way you deal with government or police or gundas, or you're dealing with people around you, so you deal with that. That is the polytheism. Monotheism is one god, and in the Middle Eastern traditions, the gods were always very powerful and they demanded submission. This is right from Akkadian time, Sumerian time, Zoroastrianism, everywhere. There is this powerful figure, much powerful and in control of everything. So it's a Middle Eastern idea. This Middle Eastern idea starts entering India about 2000 years ago, long before Islam and Christianity. It has come into India because we are trading with them. So these ideas are coming to India. And we have an all-powerful image god emerging, but some say Shiva, some say Vishnu. So until Shiva and Vishnu appear in India, you really don't have this concept of an all. Although people now will say Vedanta was there at that time, but we are back projecting. We don't see that happening. All. The yajna was an exchange. It was a clear exchange. कि मैं तुमको ये दे रहा हूँ, तुमको ये दे दो. Even today in temples, when you go to temples, bhog chadhao, उसके बाद prasad. You have to give in order to get something. So that's a thing which we don't pray to God. We go and make offerings to God. You don't make offerings in a mosque. You don't make offerings in a church. In India, they'll put these candles and all that because these are all pagan practices from Roman times. Because pagan means polytheistic practices where you negotiate. But if God is all powerful, then he's got all the power in the world, then you can't exchange as an equal. It's always a superior and inferior position. So this idea comes to India. But however, 500-600 years ago, something, in the Tantric traditions, this whole idea of emotionally connecting with the divine appears. And this becomes very powerful about 500 years ago. So it's not there before 500 years. Before 500 years, so all this Bhakti traditions that you say are about 500-600 years old, not before. It's the Tantric tradition becomes the Bhakti tradition. So in the Tantric traditions, you still negotiated with the gods. You did all these kind of rituals. So when they talk about temples, they're primarily Tantric spaces, which become Bhakti. So Bhakti, which we say Mirabai, it starts from the south to the north. So it starts with Andal, 8th century. But if you look at the early poetry, it is very, very servile. You are powerful. You are all powerful.
Exactly, yeah.
So the early Bhakti poetries are very power-based, where there is you're almost scared of the divine. You submit to the divine, like submitting to a king.
Exactly, yeah.
But it changes from Geet Govind. Geet Govind is written in the 12th century, where Krishna and Radha having a very erotic relationship. That is this whole Bengal, that is the Tantric belt. The lower Gangetic plain, Bengal, Odisha, Assam, that's the space where the male and female forms have conversations with each other. And the idea of the Bhakt and the Bhagwan having a different and complex relationship emerges after that period. So then you have the Bhakti poetry emerging, Bhakti Kal emerging, and invariably it is a male god. You don't find this much. You will never have an romantic relationship with the Devi. It's always romantic relation with the male. So you see the hierarchy there because the man is the male and I will become a woman. So all the poets would also describe themselves as women. They would use a feminine language, but you will never dare present yourself in front of the goddess as a lover. You'll say, I'm your son. So Jai Mata Di. You will never see the goddess Durga as, in fact, there are stories, if you look upon her as your lover, then she will create trouble for you, which happens in Nepal. The folk tale of Nepal is when the king looks at the goddess Taleju in a very erotic way, he's punished. And therefore, you always worship the goddess as a little girl. So there is a dynamics that happen. You find these gender dynamics have to be considered when we are considering. But yes, emotion being used. So it's not a singular, you are the master and servant. It is complex, friendship, lover, parent, all that is there. But gender has to be factored in. The factoring of the gender is very, very important because it reveals much more things. Suddenly you see some things very interesting emerging. It's in the Krishna Bhakti that you find these Sakha Bhav, Madhurya Bhav, Shringara Bhav. With Shiva, you don't see Vatsalya Bhav. You don't see Shiva as a baby. These are happening with the avatars of Vishnu because Krishna and Ram lend themselves. You will never see this with Parshuram. Parshuram is not part of the Bhakti cult at all. He's not there. Only Ram and Krishna become part of the Bhakti. Shiva only as the great faraway deity. He's feared in a way. He's also a royal god. He's associated with Chandals, Bhoot Pisach. So little strange and
mystery.
And then the Devi, it remains matriarchal. Very matriarchal and regal. never seen in a erotic form, never seen in a. So you should also see what is not being said.
Yeah.
Study these things, you
Yeah.
Yes.
study what is said and what is not said.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting. The gender dynamics that you mentioned, that's something that, we are all, it's been in our subconscious, but we've not consciously realized it. So that is really interesting. And you also spoke about the Krishna bhav, and you also happened to talk about the Radha Krishna relationship. And that reminds me, Devdutt, that we've seen many instances of polygamy, polyandry, polygyny in Hinduism, be it with Lord Krishna, be it with the Pandavas and Draupadi. And in today's times, a Hindu polygamous marriage is considered null and void in India. Makes us question if monogamy is a social construct and if you think polygamy is a natural impulse within all of us.
So look at nature. Now let's understand it from nature. If you
Yeah.
see a swan, swans are monogamous all their lives.
Yeah.
Right? तो हंसों का जोड़ा.
Oh.
So when you say, so there is nature also, there is monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
At the
Yeah.
same time, then you now look at snakes. Snakes don't have monogamous relations. They mate and they separate. Or look at a tiger or a lion. A lion will control a female pride. Monkeys, the male alpha monkey controls a group of women. Or look at a hive. A hive, the female controls all the men and everybody serves the female. So nature has all kinds of permutations and combinations, right? There's monogamy, there is polygamy, there is violence, there is control, there is the alpha male, there is the alpha female. So it's not just alpha male. The hyenas are controlled by females. The elephants, the whole elephant jhund is controlled by women. And once the man grows up, he's kicked out. So the men live very lonely, miserable lives. The females live as a group, as a community. So we have to understand that nature does not have one formula. Nature is hedging its bets and saying, okay, I'll do this. Nature doesn't care. The human beings are now trying to negotiate what is better. And monogamy is an idea which emerges. It usually, marriage itself comes from property. If concept of property, because you need to know who your children are in order to transfer property. So the rishis, for example, would, the story will go that they go to a princess, they make, they are told that you have to produce a child. They'll produce a child and run away from the wife. They don't take care of the children. These are stories which nobody wants to talk about because, Shakuntala's story, very famous. Vishwamitra and Menaka have sexual relations. The child is born. The mother just drops the baby on the floor and walks away. She says, जिसको संभालना है संभाल लेगा. So these kind of stories also exist. There is no this maternal instinct and mothers have to take care of children. No, the Kanva Rishi comes and finds the poor child and says, I'll raise it. It's a single father here. Nobody talks about who is married to Kanva. So you have these complex relations at a very organic level. There is no rigid formula. ऐसा ही होना चाहिए. So there are polygamy, polyandry, and so these things are fluid. Again, Desha Kala Guna. Royal families need to have children. You'll always hear stories of kings who are childless and then they are riding in the forest and they find this baby and they adopt the baby and the baby becomes a king. Across Sanskrit literature, you will find stories of abandoned children in the forest who are found, like a snake is found sheltering the snake or under a tree, and the tree shadow doesn't move, and then people say, oh, this is a special child, and the king who is going hunting, who has no children, finds this child and raises the child. So suddenly you find adopted children stories are so rampant because obviously kings did not have a lineage, right? They would be just one powerful guy becomes a king. Now he wants to tell you, "हम भी बड़े घराने से आए हैं." And suddenly the magic things happen in their past, and that's how storytellers will construct a past. So we find these stories are very complex. Like in Jain traditions, you will have stories that the Tirthankara is conceived in a Brahmin woman's body, but the baby is transmitted to a Kshatriya woman's body. So now you find this very interesting story. Why is the story being told? It obviously shows that the Jain, especially the Shwetambar Jains, had a discomfort with the Brahmin traditions, and they were trying to sort of distinguish themselves from these people. So you find all kinds of sexual relations in ancient India. Radha, is she married to Krishna? You ask this to members who and they'll get very disturbed.
Yeah.
I always tell you, Radha is Mrs. Krishna or not? And then they are like, we don't know. And then they will tell you some cosmic stories about it. But the fact is, in the Tantric traditions, is Parakiya. She's not his wife. Now, how do you say that to children when you show them Radha Krishna ki Mandir Murti? So these are Tantric ideas. They come from very complex spaces. We are trying to simplify them and make them, very juvenile and almost, बच्चों के लिए बना रहे हैं. But these stories come from very different spaces. So in India, there was all kinds of things. Monogamy, polygamy. Some people like monogamy, some are asexual, some are all kinds of things exist.
And it's that what makes society interesting, right? The diversity. So another facet that I've always found very interesting is the idea of prayer. And I was reading one of your articles, Devdutt ji, where you said that the purpose of Hindu prayer is to invoke the deity, praise them, and eventually ask help from them. My question really is, does God help? And if he does, my question again comes back to the idea of people praying to clear an exam, people praying to become rich and stuff like that. So if God actually does help, how does that unfold with the karma theory as well, where we are only supposed to reap on the basis of what we sow?
So the God is a mythological concept, not a historical concept. So not every culture, like for example, in Buddhism and Jainism, there is no concept of God. So atheism is not some new idea that the West has discovered. It's an idea which has been in India forever. So the thing is, we want to control our lives. And when you are insecure and frightened, what do? You pray for some magical force to support you. So some people pray, some people do puja, some people do rituals. So when you read the Jain stories, they will say that, in your last life, you treated a Jain Muni very badly, and therefore in this life you'll suffer a lot. Or you took care of a Jain Muni in the previous life and this life. So now there is no God here, but somehow karma is playing a role in deciding your fortune. So they will say, acha abhi acha karma karoge. So before exams, I will take care of people so that, during my exams I do well. So there is a kind of, in my mind, there's a calculation happening. Now, animals don't have this ability to calculate, which humans do. I mean, there are some animals apparently who can calculate. It's the vampire bats apparently can calculate and transmit blood between each other. It's a very complex. So there are some animals which do have this calculation. Ki maine tumko itna diya, tum mujhe itna do. So the human mind has the sense of innate balancing happening in the world, either in this life or across lives. And therefore, now when you pray, remember you have to talk, depends on who are you praying to. If you believe that God is all powerful, all the power is with God, so then who do you go to when you feel powerless? You go to the person with all the power in the world. However, if you believe that God is just another source, and I can control this power, which is the tantric idea that I can do jadoo and control the gods. The gods will do my bidding. And see how the written. Usne tapasya ki, the asura does tapasya. It doesn't matter whether you're moral or amoral, it doesn't matter. If you have called the god is compelled to give you a vardhan. So now it doesn't matter whether so Ravan gets a vardhan and all the asuras get a vardhan, and so it doesn't matter who you are. Morality doesn't play a very important role. You have the ability to unko vashikaran karna. You can get the gods, you can impress them so much that they are forced by the karmic logic, because now they are in your debt. So that, I will help you out. So, you have the stories of, but you find this around the world, right? Once a man goes to the jungle, saves a lion from uske pair mein keel lag jati hai, there's a nail, and he removes that nail, and then the lion comes and saves him in the arena. So there is a sense of balancing act. No, it never happens in nature. Nature doesn't think like that. It just doesn't happen in nature, because that's a very human imagination that constructs this notion of balance.
And reciprocity.
Nature doesn't measure, nature doesn't balance. These two things which are very unique to the human imagination. Balancing, measuring, valuing, evaluating. So we do that. So we tell this through our stories. So karma is one model. Justice is another model. Nature, there is no concept of justice. Justice is a very Western model. So these ideas, these are concepts, these are mythology. God, justice, equality, these are all concepts that humans have created to live a better life. With insecurity, to cope with the fact that there's nothing predictable in this world. तो अब करोगे क्या? You can be the best student in the world. We have heard these stories that this very good student worked very hard, but exams mein kuch to gadbad ho gaya, or he got a very low score. And his whole life goes for a toss, right? Because in our country, that 1 mark can make such a huge difference.
Yeah.
Go to depression, IIT nahi mila, IIM nahi mila. They think, oh my God, life is finished.
Hmm.
So all those horrors, how do I deal with it? So nowadays, some people go to drugs, some people go to parties, some people take alcohol, some people go to gods. These are different coping mechanisms that we have.
Of creating a sense of order out of the chaos that life is. And you're right that reciprocity and that transactional aspect to it is definitely. And to me also, the sense I got at this moment as you were sharing is that it's almost like आपने एक कर्म का idea आपने डाला है, and sort of over time, whenever an idea is put forth, thinking traditions में there's always an inference drawn that finds a loophole in the idea. So there's like a loophole in the idea कि अच्छा अगर ये है तो इसका implication ये है कि अगर आप बुरे हो आप फिर भी, and it could in a sense maybe be looked at as almost a critique or let's say a gentle disagreement with the conception of karma ka theory perhaps.
Yeah, because you see, if I'm telling you that your past life decides your present life, now that makes you helpless, right?
Exactly.
So then you'll say, nahi, past life nahi, abhi bhi kuch karoge to, hard work will also be karma. So the word karma means both. It means past life action. It also means present life action. So it's a pun. It's a pun on both words. So if things work out for you, you will say, oh, I worked hard and therefore I passed the exam. Or if they don't work out, isn't mere karma mein likha hua. Both, I can use it in both ways in a very clever way. But it's a coping skill, right? I want to cope with the moment of success or failure. That's how mythology emerges. So mythological stories are designed to help the human mind grapple with uncertainty of existence. That's the purpose of these stories. Otherwise, these stories have no purpose. Animals don't need stories, right? Animals can they go about living what their body is telling them to do. We have something called the mind, which sort of torments us. We are not happy with our bodies. We want a different body. We want to change our body. We want to change our world. We want to change everything around us. We just can't handle. No animal does that. No animal does that. It's the human imagination, and therefore one of the coping skills humans have created is stories.
To reconcile with. Otherwise, without the karma idea, the why me can go on forever and ever. But reconciling with the moment, the theory helps with that. And in fact, we also touched upon morality earlier, and आपने कृष्ण जी और राधा का एक बहुत interesting example दिया कि in some depictions, you're right. She is depicted as being a married woman. In some folk narratives, I remember you saying that she's even depicted as being his aunt. There's a maternal uncle she's married to. And even if you look at other deities' depictions, there are certain stories, like say some depictions of Shiva and the association with cannabis. Krishna ji ka bhi, stealing butter, teasing gopis, Radha. And I find that an interesting phenomenon ki you have depictions of divinity that are engaging in acts that either fall outside our traditional societal moral expectations as we define it today, or they subvert them. And in a society which can at times be, let me say, moralistic, what is the significance of showing divinity falling outside these conventions? And also, I guess, what makes these mythological figures so evocative to us despite them sort of falling outside these expectations that we have for each other?
So this idea of morality and ethics really comes from monotheistic cultures.
Okay.
They're not there in polytheistic cultures. So remember, we have gone through 200 years of colonial rule. But the legal system played a very important role. Even today, judges, constitution is the most important thing. Judges are the most important thing. These ideas are very new to India, 200 years old. It's not a short time. But before that, you have Islam coming in, where you have the concept of Sharia, Haram, Halal. Before that, you have Dharma Shastras, where a lot depends on who you are, which community you come from. There's a concept of Paschatap, repentance. Everything is not penal. So there's a complex way of looking at life. So they will say, what is okay for one community may not be okay for another community. What is okay for a yogi may not be okay for a married man. So, for example, if you Google an image, say Gajanan Maharaj, Maharashtra, you will find an image of an old sage who is digambar, not wearing any clothes, and has a chilam in his hand. That would be scandalous in most parts of the world. The man is not wearing any clothes, he's having chilam in his hand. But in India, we will just accept it as, oh, he's a holy man. He has abandoned the normal way of living. It's a different way of living. Ramana Maharshi is wearing just a langot and sitting there. The idea of men wearing ash and wandering around, thousands and thousands of people doing that in India, is something that is a way. In India, they'll say that ye part of society, not part of society. In society, which part are you? Upper caste, lower caste? So there is so much of variety as accepted. There is no, the moralities and rules exist within that group. And you form different kinds of groups, and then the tension is within the group. It is not across the group. It is within. While this whole idea of one rule across the group is something which comes to us from Christianity and Islam. It was never there in India before. Every tribe had its own rules, its own practices. Hum log ye khate hain, wo log ye nahi khate hain. In India, we accept that very casually, that, oh, he's vegetarian, he's non-vegetarian. Oh, they eat vegetarian, but they will not eat this kind of food. And, this idea of variation is something that is not there in Western construct. So they have this kind of universal ethics and universal morality, which Indians would never agree with, because it's diverse and dynamic. What is ethical for a rich man cannot be an ethics for the poor man. Which in the West they do not understand. Even see today, the law says that everybody is equal before the law. So if a rich man does a murder, he can get the best lawyers. The poor man does a murder, he cannot even afford a lawyer. We are saying they are both equal before the law. That's a lie. Because it'll never be so. Because one with the very good lawyers, the best lawyers in the world representing you, versus someone who has no lawyers before you. What do you think will happen?
Exactly.
So we create this illusion of equality, which is not. And we believe that आज legal system है, ethics है, morality है. ऐसे नहीं होता है. हमारे घर में भी नहीं होता है ना. The laws which you keep for your favorite son will not be there for your favorite daughter. Rules for the son is different, rules for the daughter is different, the elder son is different, the younger son is different. इसलिए तो family में conflict होता है. So India will always be wary. They'll say that, there's nothing standardized. And that is really our strength, which unfortunately we seem to forget. That they see a person for who they are. And unless they're not hurting others or themselves, you really don't care. Unless they start hurting, if their behavior starts hurting you, like somebody saying drugs, it's hurting you and it's hurting themselves. Playing loud music and the whole world is irritated with it. Tum suno na apna headphone mein, koi problem nahi hai. But if that is going to destroy your ears, then of course we have a problem. Let's deal with that. So those conversations are what really India was about and is about, because we negotiate diversity. And ethics and morality do not factor in diversity.
It's true, because it's one size fits all.
One size has to fit all, and that's what the West is facing today. They're horrified because they don't know how to deal with diversity. They use these words like diversity and inclusion.
Diversity inclusion.
Which samajh mein nahi aata hai, because the people who talk about diversity and inclusion are the people who are first to cancel you. The cancel culture comes from the group that talks about diversity and inclusion, and nobody sees its irony. Because they do not understand what diversity means. Diversity means dealing with people who are different from you. So your friend, the jo chilam smoke karne wala in our stories are always people who are not members of society. They are not husband-wives. So Shivji is this kind of a constant conflict because he's a husband. So she is saying that tum ghar ke bahar, when you are not with me, you are in this forest, you can smoke. But in the house, you'll be the husband. So this tension is created. As I said, the Gajanan Maharaj images are there. There are these holy men in India who we know take chilam, but wo ghar ke bahar rehte hain. Sufi hai. He is outside, live in the crematorium. They are wandering on the roads. They are not in the house. You'll never have a house party. It is happening. It is always outside. Yeah, it during a festival. Diwali ke samay hum log lenge. Yeah, Holi ke time mein you will. It is permitted space. Like in all tribal communities, you would have use of substances in a permitted, controlled ecosystem. So that is how. So this one size fit all doesn't work anywhere in the world really, and Indians recognized it long ago.
Although, so what you're saying is, when we have these depictions of deities or deities doing these things, are we saying ki at the time that these depictions are put forward, that there wasn't a norm being violated? Or is it that?
See, they are different. For example, Krishna is a cowherd. His behavior, and Ram is a royal member of a royal family. They are very different.
Yeah.
So you will have Krishna dancing with milkmaids, but you'll never have an image of Ram dancing with women, ever. Because royal people are not supposed to behave that way. Cowherd can behave in a particular way. So now you see that you never see Parashuram dancing and singing. Why? Because he's a different space altogether. Shiv is very different. So everyone occupies a different space. They are not, although we say all gods are one, those are lazy statements. They are not realizing they are distinguishing between different spaces. And therefore, the offerings to the gods are different. Somebody you give milk, somebody you give butter, somebody you give vegetables, somebody you give kacha. There are lots of varieties.
Yeah. Mythology, really, it is this living, breathing, changing social force. And Karan and I were having a conversation about how, the writing down of mythology concretizes it and does that ossify it. But I think another thing we were thinking about is modern times mein agar hum dekhe, mythology has always had external influences. We've discussed this today as well. You shared some beautiful examples. But I think now more than ever before, there is more widespread accessibility of mythology from the furthest reaches of the world. And these are mythologies that evolved independently of each other. Papua New Guinea ka jo mythology has nothing to do with Central American mythology, for instance. And thus their ability to impact has also widened. If I think Karan and I look at our own intellectual thinking, I think we are influenced by lots of sources. Indian myths ho, biblical stories ho, Quranic stories ho, Greek myths ho. This mixing and matching of mythologies is there in our creating an understanding of ourselves, the world, and how the two relate. But as we discussed earlier, and as you discussed in your book, The Stories We Tell, these mythologies' origin is in very distinct contexts, very different Deshkal Gun. So this mixing and matching that is happening right now, what impacts, both positive and negative, do you think that has on the individual psyche as well as on us as a society?
So there are two parts to mythology. One is the external, which is Deshkala. There's an internal part to it. We are all human beings. No matter which part of the world you are in, you will experience common emotions like anger, hatred, jealousy, pride, ambition, greed, insecurity. This doesn't change. Therefore, that will be there in all stories. No matter which story in the world, the stories will talk about jealousy, insecurity, fighting over property, fighting over things, yearning for immortality. This will not change. So that is a common factor. So it's a Venn diagram. What is common, what is uncommon. And you have to, at a human level, we'll all have the same emotions: desire, frustration, anger. So when you meet a stranger anywhere in the world, you'll say, I don't understand anything about him, but you know the fact that he's going to be hungry. He's going to have water. When it's cold, he will need warm clothes. He will know what is exchange. He will know what is trading. He will know what is fairness. This doesn't change. This is it's what makes us human. It's whether he will eat this food or that food, whether he'll eat with the left hand or right hand, whether he will, how will he drape the cloth around his body, that will vary based on the exposure he has got. But to assume that the Queen of England does not experience jealousy and a Papua New Guinea tribal does is absurd. Right? So a Papua New Guinea tribal is also worried about fever, children, marriage, competition, conflict, negotiation. Around the world, this need to have a challenge, to run a race, to have a dopamine rush. That is their adrenaline rush. Why do people, there is a very famous story in the Pacific Islands where people would travel from one island to the other, which is separated by several hundred kilometers on canoes. And they would carry, and to go do what? They would go to exchange some bracelets and rings. And there is this Kalua ring, which is called the 100 islands, and they would go in the clockwise and anti-clockwise direction, just exchanging rings. And that would create a kind of you will say that I have exchanged the ring 10 times, 20 times. That creates your status. It doesn't make any logical sense. But what it makes logical sense is that all of us are competitive. We want to show that I'm better, I'm smarter, I'm stronger. I want my stories to be sung after 10 years. So that is there everywhere. So the hero stories will be there everywhere. He fought for his people. So you always find something which is common. So it's not as different as we think it is. It is, you have to separate. So as I said, Desh Kal Gun is one, the external, and then there is the internal. The emotions will always be internal and universal.
At the core, I think, like you said, we are all the same, so that we'll find relatable content in mythology from across the world. But on the contrary, sir, do you feel that it's also weakening our attachment to our own culture and our own religion?
I don't think so. You just have to Kumbh Mela. Last time the Kumbh Mela took place, 50 crore people were there on one day. Talking about like 50 million people were there. In Mecca, in a year, I think only 2.5 million people go. And that's obligatory. The whole year, you have 2.5 million people. In Kumbh Mela, on one day, you have 5 million people landing up. So, it is not as simple as we think it is. And these are political narratives. Everybody wants to say that, things are bad so that you need me as a savior. So, so all these paranoid stories are always written by people who want to achieve something and to mobilize forces. It helps me mobilize people, we are in trouble. And that's how we unite people, right? We unite people by creating an enemy. That's the easiest way to unite people is to just create an enemy. That's the simplest model. You find that even in a business ecosystem where if Apple wants to get its sales team charged up, they will say Android is evil. Android will say Apple is evil. And Google will say Google is evil. And they create kind of a foolish stories. But it mobilizes people. It just
does.
It does. Yeah.
Women will say men are evil. Men will say women are evil. So you have these stories which are told, which are they are powerful in mobilizing resources.
Earlier, we were discussing tantric traditions, and in the traditional sense, sex usually serves two purposes. It's either pleasure or procreation. But there's also this concept of Tantra Sex, wherein sex can be used as a medium through which you achieve liberation. Could you take us through that concept and help us understand it better?
So, people, as when you give them a framework, they'll, as you said, they'll find a loophole in it. So now the logic is that when semen flows down out of your body, you get pleasure, but you also grow old. The logic is if it goes up, I can be immortal, right? So how do I become immortal? Instead of taking the semen out of my body, I'll retain it in my body and use some clever technology to push it up my spine so that it goes to my head and then gives me some immortality and magical powers. These are called Siddha. So in Hanuman Chalisa, there is Ashtasiddhi ke Data. So Hanuman is considered to be a bachelor god and therefore has achieved that level of immortality. And so the celibacy has given us magical power. And but it is also, so in Tantra, the celibacy is combined with sexuality, where even though you are surrounded by sexual forces, you do not succumb to it. In fact, you exhaust the sources of pleasure. So these are these complex ideas that you find in Vajrayana Buddhism, very explicit, but it's also there in the Hindu traditions. But in the Vajrayana Buddhism, you have these imagery of these goddesses copulating with the gods, and the gods, while pleasuring the goddesses, never really sort of succumb to the temptation. And that apparently gives them some magical power, and they say it's called Urdhva Retas. Urdhva Retas is the semen moving upwards towards your brain and giving you the moon shaped. So the whole idea of the way the moon wanes and loses its luster, it can be, that's why Shivji's, the moon is on top of his head. And these symbols, these tantric symbols. But then we should be careful of these kind of interpretations, because the other day I was seeing Jim Carrey talking about how Santa Claus comes up and down and he says that is also a tantric symbol. And I'm like, oh, this is getting interesting because anybody who goes up and down
Yeah.
becomes the tantric idea. So coming down the chimney to give us gifts, but actually you have to go up to meet Jesus in the rapture. And I'm like, oh my God. People really, so, this is what the human imagination can do, right? We can just
Yeah.
fabulous stories, and they really are exciting, right? If I tell you that Santa Claus comes down and gives you gifts, and that's really a sexual metaphor. And actually, you have to hold back, and instead of gifts, you should go up to Jesus. So I'm like, really? And I saw this on one of those tweet videos going around.
Yeah.
And the person sending it to me was saying, Devdutt, is it actually true? And I'm like, you can tell anything in this world. And I
Yeah.
keep saying that, can you verify this? How do I verify?
Yeah.
Tell me, how do I?
Yeah.
Can I measure the upward movement of semen? Because no scientific literature talks about it. So you
Yeah.
believe, right? If you don't see it. If you be Vishwas wala such is, then that's acceptance, right? You accept it.
Exactly.
You believe it and you ask yourself, why do you want to believe in it? Because it gives you
Mm.
a sense of, so you have in India, you had the Vedic tradition, which was very sensual and enjoyed the material world. Then you have the Shramana traditions, which go into celibacy.
Yeah.
And then came the Tantric traditions, which sort of challenged this celibacy and said, I can be celibate in an ecosystem of sensuality. So you have the Nath Yogi traditions, the Yogini traditions, all those, Radha Krishna traditions. They'll say Krishna is actually Achyuta. He doesn't really succumb to his pleasure, but he gives pleasure to everyone. So this kind of he's an immortal amongst mortals. So all these kind of sentences emerge. So you see the idea transforming from a normal sexual behavior to celibacy being glorified, to tantric sex being glorified, to restrained sex, which is dharma, just having sex for babies and nothing else. These kind of ideas start emerging in the world to the point of what is moral sex, what is immoral sex, what is magical sex. So humans come up with all kinds of interesting ideas.
We saw that with the Santa Claus example.
Yeah. And I think with that example, there's also that question of what was the intention of the original metaphor, and then also you've concocted a new metaphor based on old grammar. What function is that serving? So it might not be authentic, but is it useful in a current context? So there's all these complexities as well. Yeah.
So you have to hear some of the videos of nowadays these modern gurujis talking. They all talk the same thing. They talk absurd ideas, and you just have to look any guru. All of them talk magical stuff. And there are hundreds of people in the audience nodding their heads and saying, oh, this is so wonderful. They talk about dimensions. They talk about things. They talk about all kinds of unscientific ideas. Like
quantum physics is also used a lot.
Quantum physics is used always. And all the Gurujis will say that my students were IIT people who have given up IIT. They are IIM students who have given up IIM. When I was a student in college, I would hear these Babajis coming and telling, I was in IIT, now I've given it up, and now I'm this Guruji Baba. I'm from the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and I've given up everything and following this Baba. And I'm like, why are you telling me this? I'm not interested. But that is how they justify their positioning. And it's going on even today. Even today, when I see some of these, the Russians are now singing songs to Krishna. So that must be that must be true. And I'm like, maybe they're just cosplaying, Am I allowed to cosplay? Because cosplay is fun, right? But cosplay becomes, no, it's divine and he's part of. So human beings need this. We need these theatrical, we want Babajis to tell us fantasy. Like there is more to life. It's tougher to be generous. You ask these people to be generous and they'll say, nahi, Babaji ne bola hai, generous nahi banna hai. Anything which prevents me from being generous, anything which allows me to, why don't you share your wealth with people or, give your company, all these rich people, why don't you give 20% raise to everyone? No. I'll give 20% to the gods in the temples. But because my Guruji has told me, give him 20%, because that makes better business sense than giving 20% raise to employees. Or, why don't you live a simpler life? You don't have to live in this big Raj Mahal. No. Guruji also wants a Raj Mahal. No? So he wants his bike and his Mercedes and his private jets because, he's Guruji. So, and you find this across religions. It's across.
Yes. Yeah, it's
across the world. All holy men who are simple want to eat in golden bowls. And Buddha talked about it 2,500 years ago. He was like, this is going to happen. You can't stop it from happening. Because people like the drama.
Yeah, the theatrics of it is human nature. Devdaji, in your opinion, what was Soma and what are your thoughts on the possibility of some people have said that it may have been psychedelic in nature?
No, it's scientifically proven it's ephedra. It's just ephedra.
Okay.
It's a plant which is found in Afghanistan and in Central Asia. It's a
Hmm.
stock-like plant. You make a juice out
Yeah.
of it. It gives you a high. And it's
Hmm.
not a psychedelic high. It's just, it's adrenaline. It is epinephrine.
Okay.
That's it. So it gives you, you're tired, you feel highly energized, highly focused. It's the substance from which alderol is made right now for students to concentrate.
Okay.
That's all it is. It's
Okay.
proven. There is no magic about it. It's been very clearly established. It's ephedra.
Okay.
Okay.
There's another misconception when it comes to Hinduism and phallic worship. I don't know if that word can even be used, but many people sometimes even intentionally see it literally and disregard its metaphorical meaning. For those who are unaware, could you enlighten us about its metaphorical significance?
It's literal and metaphorical. Both exist. One cannot separate one without the other.
Hmm.
In many ecosystems, these ideas are completely metaphorical. The Shivling is a metaphorical idea which explains something without form. So how do you express the formless? You show
Yeah.
up.
Hmm.
And at the same time, it also represents Urdhvaretas. As I said, it is about a tantric practice,
Hmm.
about being able to withstand your sensuality in the face of temptation. So
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
is also a form which is given. So you have to, if you see just Google images of Shiva in Odisha temples, Lakulesh, just search for the image of Lakulesh, and you will see a very
Yeah.
clearly erect phallus over there,
Hmm.
which of course
Hmm.
disturbs people who have never seen those images. So Lakulesh,
Hmm.
and images of Shiva on old Parshurameshwar temple, Shatrughneshwar temple in Odisha, which is 700 AD, 800 AD. These images are there.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
those days they meant something else. Today we see something else. So
Yeah.
there's no need to be embarrassed about it. It's not one or the other. It is both.
Hmm.
Depending on the context, who is doing the puja, who is doing it, you cannot give it this one, because the human
Yeah.
mind is capable of understanding metaphor. To
Hmm.
say that there is one
Yes.
meaning is a lazy human beings, and most
Yeah.
people are lazy. So they don't like complex meanings. They want simple meanings.
Yes. Yes. They want the authoritative, this is
Lazy.
truth with the capital T.
All lazy people
Not
love. कुछ काम
yes.
नहीं करना पड़ता.
But is there a particular thought behind why this is the symbol that has been used?
It varies. See, the Lingayat community has a different reason for it.
Okay.
The Pashupata cult has a different reason for it. The Shaiva Siddhanta has a different reason for it. The Tantras have a different reason for it. So,
Hmm.
depending on which Puranic stories have a different reason for
Okay.
it. When the Shivalinga goes to Vietnam, it has a very different form. When you see it in Southeast Asia, the older lingas look like anatomically accurate images, but the
Hmm.
latter is far more abstract and geometrical. So why were the earlier
Hmm.
images different? Why were the latter images different?
Yeah.
When I ask these questions, nobody has an answer. I'm saying obviously some changes are happening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
imagine the images, it could have been a very simple explanation, and then over time it becomes complex. And as we become more and more puritanical, we start preferring the metaphorical to the literal.
Yes. There's that as well. I think our own. Yeah. It's
And I
almost like the
know
metaphorical protects us from the grossness of the physical body and its physicality.
because we're not comfortable with our bodies, right? We are no
Yeah.
longer comfortable with our bodies. Everything is vulgarized. The only way the body is presented in public is through a vulgarity.
Hmm.
And yet,
Yes.
I always tell people the Tirthankaras, the Jain Tirthankaras, they are naked images and nobody looks at
Yeah.
them as nude imagery.
Yeah.
Yet,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you see it as a nude imagery, there's something wrong with you because you're not able to see what is being
Beyond.
shown. So it's not to be taken literally. It has to be taken in a very complex. It's Digambara, is not nude.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yet,
Hmm.
depending on who sees the image, he can read it anything he wants. But
Yeah.
what is being communicated by the artist? What is being
Yeah.
communicated by the tradition? Does
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So you have to see it. You'll say, no, but technically it's a nude image, right? But you'll say, the Gambar nude doesn't quite fit in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That same problem is there. But then if I want to irritate you and you are a person who's puritanical,
Hmm.
go for
Yeah.
the literal explanation. And if you are
Exactly.
and everybody knows that people who love metaphors usually have problems with their body and with their body. So I will tease you. I want to irritate you. So I will tease you.
Hmm.
So
That's
that's
no,
what
that's a lot of wisdom
everybody
in
does
that.
it. So,
Yeah.
non-Hindus will talk to Hindus in that way. Then Hindus
Yeah.
fight back and they
Yeah.
will come up with, oh, your prophet did this or your
Yeah.
God is
Yeah.
that. And everybody
Yeah.
wants to say that I'm better than you. Basically, it comes down
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
this kind of a competitive spirituality.
Yeah.
Yes. As per the Garud Puran, which you had written a book on, what is Narak and what is the nature of punishment there? And also, how does it differ from other religions' conception of hell or damnation?
So in the Western religion, hell is a place, God has made laws, if you follow the law, you go to heaven. If you break the law, you go to hell.
Hmm.
Indian philosophy is based on rebirth and is based on
Hmm.
debt. So if you have debt and you're burdened with debt, you will go to hell. And if you are a debtor, you'll go to hell. If you're a creditor, you will go to heaven.
Okay.
It's an economic model. It's an accounting model.
I
So
never thought of it that way.
probably made it. So Banyas made it, and lawyers made the Western model. So lawyers and department are responsible.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
The last one that we have for you, Devdutt, India's Supreme Court is currently examining a petition that seeks legal recognition of same-sex marriage. Basis your understanding of Hinduism and the existence of pure relationships in it, do you believe that Hindu laws should be reformed to include same-sex marriage?
I think all laws should be reformed to allow people to do what laws exist for humans. Humans don't exist for laws.
Yes.
And the Marriage Act is basically about transmission of property.
Yeah.
Essentially, that is the reason why you have laws, because you would rather give it to the family and not to strangers, and therefore whatever. But bottom line is, it's about property and rights to access to insurance, access to medical care, all those financial things which are there. So it's just that much. It's not as complicated as we make it. And as far as Hinduism is concerned, it has never been rigid. I mean, we didn't have divorce. Now we have divorce laws. We didn't have. We had polygamy. Now we have monogamy. The idea, you don't hear ancient scriptures talking about divorce. It doesn't mean you have it today. So society changes over time, and Dharma Shastras were not written considering women as equal to men. Today, the law considers women as equal to men. So, Hindu marriage law, these laws, these adultery laws, these are all patriarchal old laws, and Desha Kala Guna, everything changes over time. If you don't allow things to change over time, you'll go medieval, and I don't, medieval world order. Good for some people who want to cosplay, but they want to do cosplaying in air-conditioned room. Of course, they want that air conditioning.
Exactly.
So I want to say, you really go and live in a village, and then we will see how you will enjoy that life. After 3 days of cleaning the cow sheds, you'll be not in a very happy place.
For sure.
That's so true. That's so true. People conflate just because something is old that it must be true and it must be wise. But they want to pick and choose the old, right? Like something that makes me uncomfortable. This is bad. This is not traditional. But if you fall ill, you want modern medical help. No, you want your air conditioning.
Yeah, the milkmaid is not just associated with milk. She's also associated with cow dung. That part you never see, right? You'll always but you try to take care of a cow for 5 days, and you'll know what is physical labor.
Yes.
Because it's it's not easy taking care of a cow, and it needs cleaning and washing, not just going once in a while and doing an Instagram post with the cow. Clean the dung 5 times a day and keep the place clean with no fleas there, and then life will be interesting. You don't need, you can outsource it to staff and come up.
That's such a beautiful encapsulation of that idea. And I think this time with you, Devdutt, has just flown by. It's been such a wonderful conversation. We've learned so much today. Thank you so much for doing this, for being so generous with your time. Before we leave, would you have any parting words?
I'm good. I'm glad you did the session, and do send me the link and whenever you'll do that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Welcome. Thank you for your time, sir.
Okay. Thank you once again for your time.
Please hit the like button if you enjoyed the conversation. Do let us know in the comment section below which part you found the most interesting, the most insightful. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to see more such episodes, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the bell icon to be informed of the next time we post a video. And we will see you very soon in another episode. Take care. Bye.